There's an overwhelming amount of financial advice in the news and on social media. Who do you listen to? Are they looking out for what's best for you? How do you tune out the noise? In this podcast, trusted advisors Emily Agosto, CPA, and Amanda Vaught, JD, bring their extensive education and experience to delve into all aspects of personal finance. Emily and Amanda make topics like investing, taxes, and financial planning interesting and accessible. And they provide a framework to help you think through the plethora of financial advice and news out there. Are you ready to start making the best personal financial decisions for you? Welcome to Connecting the Dollars with Propel Financial Advisors.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dollars. Today we are going to talk about kind of an updated version of our Home Buying as an Investment podcast we did in March of 2022. It is episode 10, and we list a lot of pros and cons of purchasing a home and thinking of it as an investment. So the main things we talked about were the lack of liquidity, the changing in interest rates, and there's not necessarily a guarantee that your home will retain its value. So Amanda is going to bring us to the current state just over 2 years later, and give an overview of the current issues we're seeing now, and just a little update.
Yeah. I think when we recorded that episode, the 30-year rate had just gone over 5%. And that was considered like crazy at the time because it had been so high. And now I just checked, the average 30-year fixed rate is 7.9%. So it's
Increasing.
going up, right? It is a little volatile, and that was specific to New York, and it depends on your credit rating, all those disclaimers, right? But I think across the board for most people, it's gone up significantly. So, I think people who are starting to feel squeezed in 2022 because of the 5% rate are even more squeezed now, right? And people who hoped that the rates would come down or the Fed would just raise rates and then just cut them again quickly, I think those hopes are quickly drying up. It looks like the Fed, we don't know what they're going to do, right? But they have used the phrase higher for longer several times. So I don't think you can really count on the rate going down anytime soon.
Yeah, so that further illustrates our point even back then, that like the interest rates, if you were thinking they were high then and you're like, okay, I'm not going to sell my house because the interest rate is too high for me to purchase a new home, and you want to maintain your lower interest rate, it's even, 2 years later, you're still waiting.
Yeah, it's gotten, and the home insurance effect has made it even worse for a lot of people because the rates to insure your home have gone up significantly.
Right.
A lot of people have trouble even finding insurance. I know it's an issue in Florida and parts of California and other places where they've seen a lot of natural disasters. We've heard a lot of stories from people who are deciding to go without home insurance because they just can't afford it, either because they can't find it. What they do find is just too expensive for them, and they just don't have the cash on hand to pay for it. So if people get in this situation, say if they have a lot of their retirement tied up in their home, and say they don't want to refinance because they don't want to lose their low rate, or they're holding out, waiting for rates to go down so they get a better rate to, what are you going to do? Get to refinance your home just so you can afford to buy home insurance on it? It just, yeah. So it's
They're stuck.
unfortunate that people, they get stuck in this position, or they don't want to sell, they don't want to downsize because, they're waiting for the rates to go down. It's unfortunate that people find themselves in these situations.
Right.
So, we don't want to like shame anyone or make people feel bad for being in that situation, because sometimes these things are out of your control. But if you are in a position in, your 30s, 40s, how do you prevent getting to that point? What should you do? And so that's what I think we want to cover today.
Yeah, so it's specifically talking about, home buying for people, it's an individual decision. So we're specifically trying to focus on home buying as an investment. Like the main idea is don't put all of your liquid, or maybe not the best idea to put all of your liquid cash into a home. And so continuing on that theme, the how to prevent this situation. So when you are someone who wants to buy a home, you're in that position, you're looking to kind of, you're ready to, you have everything, all your ducks in a row, I suppose, and you're starting to look. There are 5 things we came up with that you should check in with before making that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just want to say too, we do meet with clients who are excited about buying a home, that
Yeah.
it's like a dream. Um, and sometimes we have to, this other accounting teacher, she calls it being the dream killer. Like we don't want to be the bearer of bad news and be the dream killer, but
Right.
um, sometimes it's good, all the times it's good to check in with reality and see, is buying a home the right move for you? Um, Sometimes you're forced to buy a home, maybe because you need to relocate for a job or what have you. Those things can happen. But if we're talking to somebody who is choosing to enter the housing market for the first time, what would be the ideal way to go about it?
Right. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah. So you want to take the first one, Emily?
Sure. So the first one we came up with was being flexible within your location. So Amanda and I both live in big cities. There's a lot of renting in Chicago and even more in New York. And it's beginning to, at least here in Chicago, there's not a lot of affordable single family homes available to first time homebuyers. And so a lot of people end up, branching out to the suburbs. Even people who can afford homes in Chicago or, have can afford their pick of homes in Chicago end up moving to the suburbs because of the schools. So depending on, what your next 5, 10 years, where you want to live, there's a lot of factors, and being flexible on your location is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if your dream is to buy a home in such and such suburb, um, that might not be a realistic. And if you're really set on that certain location, you might have to delay your home buying um, for years. It depends, right?
Yeah, and they're not saying you can't ever live there, but yeah, you might just need to do a first time, or what do they call it? Starter home
Starter
or a
home. Yeah.
condo somewhere
Yeah.
else for a little
Yeah.
while.
hmm Yeah. So right, it can happen in stages. So maybe your ideal home is something, but maybe you're not quite there yet. So you could
Yes.
start with something smaller, something in a different location. So flexibility in general is helpful, right? So. Um, I think, do you want me to, the next one
Sure.
is one of the most important is proper budgeting. So if you're used to say renting an apartment or renting a home, um, and you have a certain monthly payment you make towards rent, you'll think, oh, the mortgage will be this amount compared to the rent I'm currently paying, and then say, oh, I could swing that. Um, but no, there's more to it than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to think of your insurance. Hopefully, you can afford it. I mean, this is something I learned today. I thought that states required you to have home insurance, but it's not the state, it's the mortgage lender that typically requires a person to, have
Insurance
insurance
policy.
so that they'll give you the mortgage. Yeah, and so that includes home insurance. You have to think about maintenance on your home. Like, what state is your home in? Is it good to go, knock on wood, for the next 10 years, or do you anticipate needing to replace a roof, replace a major appliance, something like that? and also property taxes. Those have been going up, at least in my area,
Like, yeah.
significantly over the
Mhm.
past few years. So you kind of have to build that in. It's not just like one payment,
The
like Amanda
current
said.
rate now is not going to necessarily be the rate next year or five
Right.
years.
Exactly. And when you're paying rent, it's just like usually just that one chunk.
Yeah. So I think what we have told people is take your current payment. So say you're paying $1,000 in rent, very fictional
That'd be
scenario,
great. Yeah.
and say you run the numbers, and if you buy a home, your new monthly payment will be $2,000. So start now, take your $1,000, send it to your landlord. The extra $1,000 that you'll need, put that into a bank account, a savings account. Don't touch it. And then you can feel like what it's like to live with that $2,000 a month going towards housing, that
That's
when
good.
before you only had 1,000 a month going towards housing. And if that feels like tight or it's tough on your budget, that is a good sign that you cannot afford the home that you're looking at. Um, and then as a side benefit, you have an extra $1,000 a month saved that will help you with your moving expenses. So if you are serious about buying a home, I think that could be a good place to start as far as budgeting.
Yeah. That's a really good exercise. I like that one.
Yeah.
And
And
then,
I'll just mention, I know we want to keep this short, but
yeah.
I was just going to say recently I saw on social media somebody complaining that they're they were earning $130,000 in Chicago. They were single, no children, and they thought that wasn't enough money to live on. And then once you looked at some of the numbers of this person, they were spending 50% of their income on their housing payment. Um,
That's a
and
lot.
so that is generally going to be way too high. That's going to squeeze you. I think the guideline is more like 45 to 30%.
I've even heard like, well, I guess 30 I've heard most often, but I've heard some people say even like 20 to 25%, which
I think
in
it used to
cities
be
it's, yeah.
it used to be 20 to 25%, but because of the housing prices have gone up so much that the reality is the people can't afford anything with
Yeah.
that. They keep it at 20%. So
Yeah. That's rough. Um,
yes, it's rough out there. Right.
Not to make light of it, it really is. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was just thinking again, now I'm going off on a tangent when we want to keep this shorter, but that person who is spending the 50% on their home or their condo, wherever they're living, is probably in a very nice neighborhood. Maybe it's very walkable and there's a lot of, amenities that to be had there. But I think one of the main benefits of living in Chicago or a city like Chicago, a big city, is that we have good transit. So if you just move a little farther out, it's very easy to get to a lot of different locations. So it just goes back to that first point of being flexible and taking advantage of what's already existing where you live. But
Yeah.
let's move on to number three is diversification. So diversify your portfolio. So this is the whole main idea of like your home. Sure, it's an asset, but it's not a liquid asset. You want to be sure that you still have enough money left over after you pay your living expenses to be able to still contribute to the things, to your retirement accounts, to your 401k, to your kids' 529s. All of those things are also important to consider with your spending.
Yeah. I think there is a big myth out there that you're purchasing a home is your ticket to building wealth. And we just think that there's nothing further from the truth. I mean, it can be part of a portfolio, but if you sinking all your money into one asset, that is not the way to go about it. You need to have that diversity through the stock market, through the bond market, through other assets that could be appropriate depending on what your situation is. But becoming overly leveraged by taking out a mortgage, which is a significant debt, and having it all into one property, which could
Yeah.
catch on fire, which
Yeah.
could like horrible things happen, right? And so then that just blows up your whole situation. So let's avoid that if at
Yes,
all.
if we can.
Yeah.
All right. Number 4.
Yes.
So aside from your homeowner's insurance, it's also a good idea to think about life insurance, disability insurance, and just emergency savings in general. Because once you buy your home, like I was just thinking, when we purchased our home about 9 years ago, like we both have different jobs now. Lots of things have happened to change our income situation. So you have to like kind of prepare for that potentially. If there's a job loss, if there's an accident and someone can
Mhm.
no longer work, that's going
Yeah.
to, your mortgage payment's not going to go away.
Yeah. 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 Right. Exactly. If you do, yeah, if something tragic happens, don't even want to leave your spouse in that position trying to make a mortgage payment. And maybe they were dependent on your income to make the mortgage payment. And then all of a sudden they've lost a spouse and then they are forced to move because they
Yeah.
can't afford it. And so that just goes to part of the risk management as how we view it, right? So if you are putting a significant sum into your home, um, being properly insured is another way to diversify um, out of that
Yeah.
or, de-risk it. So
Mhm.
I think a lot of people don't think about that. I know it can be difficult to think the worst can happen, but
Yeah.
we've seen the worst happen and it's not good.
Yes, unfortunately, I've seen position or situations recently where life insurance literally kept the lights on for people. Like it was, if they didn't have it, they would have had to wait a really long time for probate to go through when, someone passes away. It's not an
Good.
automatic process. So life insurance really came through for them.
And life insurance payments, they go through very quickly,
Yes.
right? I mean, if you have other money tied up in a will, I mean, that can take a year or more to get the money out.
Hmm.
And when
Right.
the bank doesn't care, they want their
No,
payment, your mortgage, right?
exactly.
Um,
Right.
okay, and then should we go to the final one now?
Yes, our last list, or number 5 on our list, is consider your lifestyle. So, since the pandemic, I mean, people are working remotely, people can work from all kinds of places. Like I said, I own a home, and every once in a while, I'm kind of like, oh, we can't just go, move to wherever for a little while. Like, in a way, you're stuck. I'm not unhappy with my situation. I feel very lucky to be living where I am. But yeah, it's a little different. Like, you can't just pick up and go very easily.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important to point out too the actual cost of buying home is can be significant. You will have to pay your broker's fees, your lawyers, title insurance, all the closing costs, your initial mortgage payments. Most of those payments are going towards just pure interest. You're barely even touching the principal.
Mhm.
And so a general rule of thumb is that if you move within 5 years, you're probably losing money on the transaction.
Right.
So when you do buy the home, you do want to be committed and ready to stay there for the long term.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously things happen, right? People lose jobs and they need to move for whatever reason, but so as much as possible without, knowing the future, right?
Yeah. If you're someone who likes to, bop around and you think you have the freedom to do that over the next 5 or so years, it's probably not the best choice for you. So,
Right. So, and in the meantime, I just want to point out that, one of the reasons there is the myth that buying the home builds wealth or is your pathway to wealth, is because it forces people to make a monthly contribution into their mortgage, right? And so month to month, that does build up. It's like a forced savings, and that's why that wealth effect is there. So if you are not purchasing a home, you should be making those monthly contributions to your savings, to your retirement, to what have you, to have for the future,
yes, for
if
sure.
you can, right?
Right,
If
if you
you're,
can.
yeah,
So, Yeah, I think that kind of reiterates all the points that we made in episode 10 and even goes a little bit further. So, anything else you would
Yeah,
like to
so
add?
hopefully that's helpful. Yes.
Yeah,
We didn't even touch on people who want to buy homes as investment properties, which is a
right.
whole different thing.
Yeah, that's another can of worms we could talk about on
Maybe another
another
episode.
for sure.
Yeah.
All
So
right. Well,
maybe, yeah, if you're interested in hearing our thoughts on buying a home as an investment property, let us know. Because
yes.
that gets into there's other tax issues and
Oh,
what
yeah.
have you.
It's another world. All
Yes.
right. Well, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed our list for today, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Emily.
Bye.
That will do it for this episode of Connecting the Dollars. Nothing discussed in this episode should be considered legal, financial, or tax advice. If you like what you heard, please subscribe for more at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your content. When you do, please give us a rating and a review. To see the links we mentioned in our show, along with other great Propel Financial Advisors content, go to connectingthedollars.com. You can find our past episodes there and subscribe to our newsletter. And if you're still here because you have a general question, you can email us directly at info@connectingthedollars.com. Or, if you're interested in working with us, click the Schedule a Consultation button on our website. Thank you for listening.